worth coming from cold water itself, wasn't it, Les? Just to hear that.
Very good.
Thank you. It's Dolores Burris, as you know, on the solo. John Stoddard has been our worship leader. Most of you probably don't even know there's a book called Zephaniah in the Old Testament, but it's a small book, short book, one of the so-called 12 minor prophets. Minor not in terms of importance necessarily, but in terms of length. They weren't so ridiculous in the olden days either. They recognized the difference between a major work and a minor work had less to do with what was in it than it did length. So a major writer writes long books and a minor writer writes short books. That's why the Russians are all major writers. God help us when a Russian writes a novel. I think the reason is it takes so long to write out those names. You know, every time. Do you read Russian novels like I do? I always take the first 4 letters and that's the name. I can never remember the whole thing. Yeah, Nikolaevich becomes Nick and all that kind of stuff. Well, Zephaniah is an interesting book, and woe to her that is filthy and polluted, to the oppressing city. This is a fantastic opening phrase. If I were to do a sermon today, which I'm not going to do, on the problems of ecology. Remember, we're dealing with something 800 BC, and the problems of the city were every bit as much then, if not more, than we're facing now. The problem now is that we've created cities around the globe so that we've closed in. We're all cities now. Country and air and what have you. Back then this city was small enough that there were wide areas open to it. But woe to her that is filthy and polluted, to the oppressing city. She obeyed not the voice. She received not correction. She trusted not in the Lord. She drew not near to her God. Her princes within her are roaring lions. No pun about the preacher. Her judges are evening wolves. They gnaw not at the bones, or they gnaw not the bones to the marrow. Her prophets are light. It means up here. They aren't profound. They aren't deep. They don't penetrate to the human existence. They go around with silly little sayings, talking about God and all as though it were something that can be grasped in the hands. They don't struggle with the depths of their existence. It's a fantastic little book. I'm going to do a Bible study on it sometime. They are the ones who sit around and who count numbers and look at the pews and say things that please people, but don't struggle deep down in their existence and try to understand what God would have them do. We've all been a number of times when we have seen the prophets or the priests or the clergy or the so-called people of God who have such light, airy, fantastic answers but have never dealt with the problems of life. Unlike the prophets of old who were dragged screaming, yelling, shouting, burning, spiteful into their profession, it's now considered a good thing to do to become a clergyman. And I think our churches show the results of it. Her prophets are light and treacherous persons. Her priests have polluted the sanctuary. They have done violence to the Lord. The just Lord is in the midst thereof. He will not do iniquity. Every morning doth he bring his judgment to light. He faileth not, but the unjust knoweth no shame. This is the heart of Christianity. And this cuts to the very core and existence of American society today. We'll talk a little bit about it later on, but I just want to pause here so you'll remember this. We are living in an age where nobody is responsible for anything they do. I didn't know it. I can't be responsible for what I don't know. But the biblical message throughout is that God reveals to people what they ought to do, and when they don't do it, what is sinful is not the fact that they've done something wrong very often, but that often they don't do the things that they know deep down they ought to do. And that God knows and helps us to know. The impact of the message is that we do understand, and we can con ourselves into believing we don't know it, but that when we look at ourselves and have the finger of God pointed at us, through the reading of His Word, through valid preaching, through valid interchange and experience together, we ultimately come to the realization that God in our lives points to us, and we know to do it, and we have to do it. The just Lord is in their midst. He will not do iniquity. Every morning He brings His judgment to light. He fails not, but the unjust know no shame. They're proud of what they're doing. We'll come back to that. Therefore, wait upon the Lord, said the Lord, until the day that I rise up to the prey, for my determination is greater than the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms to pour upon them my indignation. For then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may call upon the name of the Lord to serve Him with one consent. Over the past few weeks, both in our Tuesday morning's discussion group and a number of conversations, I've tried to understand the concept of trust. I must confess from the very beginning, I don't have the foggiest idea of how to approach what's to be said. How would you define trust? We spent 2 hours on it, wrangling over it at one point in our Bible study, and came up with the idea that it's almost undefinable. What do you mean by trust? The Bible almost never talks much about it. It just tells you to do it. How would you define trust, and how does it develop? And do you develop trust, or do you start with it? Is it something that you have to learn, or is it something that you have and have to unlearn? Is it a condition, or is it an approach to life? And what do you mean by trust? And why is it in American society trust is something which is almost ridiculed and laughed at? You see, one of the things as we were reading through here I reminded you of is the fact that today, very often, the evil which man does is made to look good, clever, with the appearance that if something is clever, it must therefore be wise. And in American society, as you well know, it is not the wise man who is respected, it's the clever man, the manipulative man, the one who can make you feel like you're doing something for your own good while he's doing it for his own. Sidney Harris pointed at it the other day that one of the things he can't stand in television advertising is the company who tries to convince you that what they are doing is for your good. We are seeking oil in America for your good. What about the prophets? Oh, wait, no. That's just an incentive. But if it weren't for your good, we wouldn't do it. Well, that's nonsense, and we recognize it as nonsense. We have to recognize down through that basically a healthy relationship has good on both sides, but it's so typical. I love advertising because it mirrors the worst of us, seldom the best. And it mirrors the fact that we try to convince people that what we are doing for them is for their good. I shouldn't tell you this, but for your own sake, you should know. And then you know somebody's going to slam you, right? Do you ever stop and say, I shouldn't tell you this, but you're really the most tremendous person I've ever met and I've enjoyed? No, nobody ever starts a sentence that way. Isn't that right? Whenever somebody says, I shouldn't tell you this, you know it's going to be negative. Enough said on that. We make our vices virtues. We are moving into a situation in which in order to clear up crime, we don't solve the problems that result in crime, we just make crimes legal. Therefore, if you make everything legal, there's nothing illegal and no crime. It's very simple. We see it with pot, dope of various kinds. We see it with all kinds of things where the laws, for whatever reason, are not too carefully kept, and then pretty soon we decriminalize. We have a whole new word to do that. Our vices are made virtues by the fact that if they're no longer illegal, they're okay. And you can apply that any way you want. Virtue is made to be naive. The saints are naive individuals who don't really face life. It's nice to have saints, we say, in American society. It's nice to have people who are out there and sort of dreaming the dream, the Don Quixotes of the world. But they really are foolish old men who have dreamed something that isn't real. The real world, you tell your kids, is a world where you got to fight and be aware and you got to be watchful all the time. You see it in the parents, and you see it in the kids, and you see it in the society, a society which is so afraid of itself and so distrustful of its own feelings that it distrusts everything else going on about it. How often do you believe what you hear or you see? I have not watched the great televised discussions between Mr. Nixon and Mr. Frost. There are a couple of reasons for it. One of them is that if Mr. Nixon is guilty, I don't like somebody being paid millions of dollars for something that they did wrong. Secondly is that I'm very unhappy with Mr. Frost. What Mr. Frost says very publicly in his conversations is, don't trust Mr. Nixon. We're not going to let him see what the questions are. We're not going to let him see what the results are. He hasn't got any control over the editing, but trust me. I'm going to do all those things, and I'll give you the true picture. Now, wouldn't Mr. Frost feel that he can give a better picture than Mr. Nixon? Bugs me. I'm madder at Mr. Frost than I am at Mr. Nixon on this one. I wouldn't touch the thing. I wouldn't watch it for anything. I don't even read the newspaper accounts on it. I keep waiting for the polls to call me so I can tell them the truth about this. Mr. Frost is the one that's grinding me. Now he's saying, trust me. But you know what Mr. Frost has done? He's taken segments from all over and created a program. I would watch the program if it were live, uncut, unedited, and uncensored. Then it would be an honest encounter between two people talking about something. But as soon as Mr. Frost takes several hours and creates moods and puts this segment from this segment together to give an illusion or an impression of something, I'm not very trustful at that point, and I'm not going to watch it. I probably won't boycott the sponsors because I can't know who the sponsors are if I don't watch the program, can I? So I guess they're lucky that way. Well, there is a sense of distrust, and that sense of distrust works deep down throughout each of us, and we come to try to understand it, and we know it's in us, and we see it in our children who start off being so trusting, and we have to literally kick it out of them. But over a period of time, the broken trust and the broken feelings and the broken hopes and the broken dreams, which are all part of what breaks trust, causes kids to retreat more and more and more and become more and more negative, and to look upon trust not as a virtue but naivete. Well, I don't know. Seems to me, having given all these kinds of things and being juggling them up and down, and still not knowing what trust is all about, that for the purpose of mutual growth and development, I'd like to just try a couple of ideas on you. I've been trying to understand what preaching is about this week. This is completely beside the thing. This is the worst time of the year for me. I don't know about you guys. The sunshine picks me up and all that, but I am spiritually, mentally, and physically exhausted. Every sermon now takes 3 times as long, and it never comes out as good. I'm tired of preaching. I'm tired of trying to get ideas together. I'm tired of the research. I want to sit back and read and enjoy things, and I want to sort of recharge my batteries. And I got a recharge this morning. Thank God for Chrissy. I said, I don't have any new ideas about trust. She said, you don't have to have any new ideas about trust. Part of what your job is to help people formulate what they already know to be true. Isn't that interesting? I never thought of preaching quite in those terms. I think of preaching as teaching. I think of preaching as exhortation. I think in a sense preaching as sharing and showing, but I never really thought about it in those terms. That part of the job of a sermon is not to necessarily show anything new, but just to help to formulate in a reasonable manner what people already know to be true so that they can understand and talk about it within themselves. Then she told me something which I didn't know. Received a call this week from a young lady that wants to be married. And she had attended a number of years ago when I was at Pilgrim Church in Birmingham a series of sermons and lectures that I gave on the art of loving. This must have been, how long ago since I've been there? 7 years? 8 years? 7 years ago, yeah. At that age, at that time, she must have been 21, 22, something like that. She's getting married now after all this many years. She called and she said, I would like to have Jim perform the ceremony. We've been in touch. She was not a member of that church. She came specially for that series. And she said to Chrissy, When Jim was at Pilgrim, he did a series of sermons on the nature of love that so completely solidified my thinking that I decided at that point that as much as I liked the idea of being married, as much as I liked the idea of raising a family, as much as I felt that that was my role and place, I would not enter into any kind of marriage relationship until I could understand it in terms of the loving relationship he spelled out in that series. That picks you up, doesn't it? 7 years ago, somebody's still holding on to an idea, and she said, I've met the man, we have that relationship, and we want to move forward and grow with it. Well, that picked me up. I don't know. You very seldom see the results of your preaching, and I guess maybe that's how I got here this morning. Otherwise, I think I'd have turned around and gone back home and gone to bed. Trust is an approach, not a state of being. That's number one thing about so many things in life. We have a tendency in American society to look for things inwardly and to keep them inwardly and not to realize that you oftentimes have it even though you're in turmoil. For example, the question of inner peace versus outer peace is a question which would not apply to the Bible whatsoever. I have very great doubts whether a guru sitting up on a mountaintop has any inner peace any more or less than you or I do in all of our struggles. He may avoid a certain number of problems, but inner peace is not a state of being. Inner peace is an approach. You have peace within yourself when you are able to reach outside of yourself and face confidently all things which come your way. This is not to deny in any manner, shape, or form that there are problems in life, that there are upheavals, that things set you back on your backside, that things cause you to really go through upheavals in life. An inner peace is not some sort of a blatant turning off of everything going around you and living secluded in a cave like Pope Shenouda, the person on the interview today, did for 6 years, sleeping on the floor, eating bread and water, and seeing nobody, talking to nobody for 6 years in a cave out in the wilderness of Egypt. What did he learn about life and the spiritual life at that particular point? He really couldn't answer that question when I asked him. He said, I just learned that I have many faults and sins. You have to go out into a cave for 6 years to learn that? I barely get out of bed to the breakfast table when I've learned that. What is there about the idea that peacefulness is a retreat from life? And that it's a state of being in which you sit there like a big plot. And you don't react, and you don't feel, and you don't get shook up, and you don't cry, and you just let everything go on by you. That's not peace. That has nothing to do with peace. Peace is an active approach to life that sits there with confidence and drives us forward to look at that which is wrong and to help make it right. Peace is the drive which deep down inside of us says that under God, whatever has to be done, I will do. Peace is an active force in life, not a passive state of being. Now, if that's true of peace, it's the same thing of trust. Trust is not something where you sit back and say, I trust, I trust, I trust. What's the validity of that? Trust is an active force. It reaches out to people on their best. It assumes the best. It looks for the best. It is not jealous. Does that sound like 1 Corinthians 13? It is not jealous. It is not insecure. It is not looking at other people saying, what are you going to do to me now if I let my guard down and open myself to you? It is an active state that says, I will under God. And I believe in that fully. But these things have to be done under God. That's the driving force that keeps us from looking so much within ourselves and our own aches and pains to lose sight of the greater truth. That under God I will reach out to others and I will be faithful to them and I will be trustful to them. I had a conversation the other night with a number of people about the concept of trust around a table. And one of the young ladies who was present said, I don't trust anybody. I said, oh my God. You didn't say that. Oh, yes. She said, I don't trust anybody. I said, well, you're drinking some liquid beverage there. You trust the person that brought it, that they didn't put any poison into it. You trust the bottler that made it, that he did it according to certain standards. You trusted the people that sold those all the way down the line. As a matter of fact, you drove here. You trusted other drivers on the way. You trust that people, when you are dealing with them in the unknown, you trust. Why don't you trust those that you know? I said, secondly, you trust far more than you know you do. And I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to break every rule that I've ever held, and I'm going to say something to you that I would normally never say to anybody. You trust me. You trust me because I can say anything that I want to you, and you will listen. You may not accept it, but you will listen, and it will not disturb our relationship because you know that I don't want to hurt you. And if I say something to you, it's because I feel it. I may be wrong, and we can talk about why I'm wrong, but you know that I don't want to hurt you. Therefore, our conversation is based on trust. And you trust me. And you trust me implicitly and explicitly and in all ways. Well, the conversation moved on to a number of other things. And as we were going, she said, I owe you for that one. And a few days later I saw her and she said, you know, you're right. I guess I do trust. My problem is that sometimes I expect too much out of the trust. And what breaks the trust is not a lack of trust, but broken hopes and expectations. Now, she had taken step one. Now, that led to step two, which is really even tougher. Part of what trust is to accept people for what they are. And not to place your hopes and dreams into somebody else and then be shattered because they don't make it. Oh, how tough that is. We're tough on ourselves that way. My greatest frustrations in lives are I don't accomplish what I think I ought to be doing. I'm constantly, not at peace, if I'm not at peace at all, with that kind of a thing. Got all kinds of things that I really want to be doing, and I'm not quite getting there. Always falling a little short. Some of you are smiling, aren't you? Always falling a little short. Now, is that a broken trust? No, I don't think it breaks the trust at all. I think it just deals with realistic expectations. You see, trust is an approach. And once I begin with the approach, and once I begin to reach out with trust, I learn not to expect from people what they're not capable of giving, but to accept from people what they are. And that is tough. That is difficult. Doesn't matter whether it's in a marriage, doesn't matter whether it's a father, mother, son, daughter kind of a thing, doesn't matter whether it's with friends or a preacher or something like that. The whole thing is that you have to begin to accept people for what they are. And a growing relationship says instead of setting expectations here and here way out and trying to get to them, we take us from where we are and grow from that on the way out. And the trust is that as we grow, we will grow together. And as we grow together, we will learn to appreciate each other. Trust is positive. It's not negative or naive. I absolutely reject the idea that all values in life are naive and the only real values are evil values. Hate that which doesn't do good to you. Despise them who don't use you properly. Be on your toes and step on them before they step on you. Hit first before they hit you. Close yourself off. Don't let anybody get so close that they'll really understand what you are. Because if they understand you, they won't like you. What a negative thought that is. Instead of saying, hey, here I am. There may be things about me that you don't like. If you're wholesome and healthy, there are. The worst thing in the world you could say to me is, I like everything about you. That's a denial of my human personality. Isn't that right? It's a denial of who I am to say every single thing about you I like. I am not God. I am not the Son of God in that sense. I am a human being with faults, and I need to work on those faults. What I need is not for people to ignore them, but accept them and love me in spite of them. And the whole concept of the Christian gospel is precisely that one loves and forgives as opposed to understands and holds against. I had lunch Friday with a minister. He's all caught up in the psychological game. It's a good game. I'm not anti-psychology. I'm not anti-psychiatry. There's a place for him, and I really believe there's a place for him. But as we talked over the luncheon table for about an hour, I finally said to him, listen, you are denying the fundamentals of Christianity. Christianity doesn't care why you did something. It says if you've done it, good, that's it. We have to begin from now. Christianity says I don't have to know why for 25 years you've done this to me. All I have to know is that under God I can forgive and forget that, and we can build a new relationship as of today. Christianity says no matter where I've been, there is a loving relationship which transcends even the understanding of it. Why is it we always want to talk about our problems and not the good things? By the time we talk about our problems, we build them even bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger because they become the focal point of all of our existence. Oh, God help us. Let's talk about some of the good things in life, not all of the problems. And let's say that as we reach out as good Christians with the understanding of the forgiveness of God, that whatever has been done to me or against me or whatever I've done, maybe I understand it, maybe I don't, but I have the power under God to change and do it differently this time. That's so totally different than the psychologists who want you to go back and spend years to find out why Daddy did this to you on the wrong potty training, and once you understand that, you're going to do something. Now, I don't have any regrets on that. 90% of the people, according to one recent psychological study, are upset psychologically. It may be. I don't know why they don't say 100%. My point is that out of the 90% that are upset, let's say 100%, maybe 10% really need the psychological care. The rest of us are conned into thinking we need it, and it's become almost acceptable in society that if you aren't under some kind of psychiatric care, you're not normal. God help us. Where is there room for the Christian gospel to reach out and say, sure, if I want to make it that way, I can, but under God and a forgiving relationship, I won't. Let's leave the psychologists and the psychiatrists to work with the 10% that desperately need them. And let the other 90% that don't so desperately live creative lives without having to dig through all the trash piles to find out what's there, but move on from here in a triumphant living. Whatever mistakes I've made in the past 39 years aren't the important thing. I want to avoid the mistakes in the future. And whatever I've been through in the past isn't the important thing. I've got to live life today, now. And I can't be so worried about the past or so worried about the future that I forget the now. Because when I do, I end up never living life. The fears that instruct come in through and the negativism that reaches out to people has got to be fundamentally stopped, and we've got to begin to say it's a new day. And every day is a new day. The Lord is in the midst thereof. Every morning he brings his judgment to light. He fails not. And every day we begin off with another. Now, one last thing, very, very quickly. Do you start with trust or do you build trust? That's a tough one. That's a chicken and the egg kind of a thing, isn't it? I would say fundamentally that you start with trust and you build greater trust, but that you can't go from non-trust to trust. Now that goes against everything, again, that we learn. We want to learn to trust somebody. Well, listen, if you fundamentally start off not trusting them, how are you going to learn to trust them? The very fact of non-trust between the relationships of two people means that you don't believe anything you're told. Or you're skeptical of it. How are you going to learn to trust them? What's going to break through? I love you becomes, oh, I'm not so sure they mean that. They're trying to manipulate me if you don't trust. See what I mean? How can you go from non-trust to trust? You can't. It's fundamentally impossible. The best you can do is to go to a non-war existence. A standoff. A holding aside. A failure to hit clash on, head on like this. You can't develop trust from a non-trust situation. Basically, you develop trust from trust. You may develop more trust. You may learn over a period of time that that individual really does open up and mean what they're talking about. That's development of trust, but it must start with a fundamental seed of trust. If you run into somebody that you basically don't trust, that's why these debates are so idiotic. Those who don't trust Mr. Nixon aren't going to be convinced about his trustworthiness by watching the debates, and those that trust him aren't going to be convinced of his non-trustworthiness, right? There's no way. The die is cast. And you start with a loving, trusting relationship, and you be willing to get hit on the jaw. Now, that's the tough part. That's the tough part. I have to be willing to take the chance. I would rather trust each of you and have 79 good relationships and take the chance that one of you will really cream me and I'll have to pick myself up and in love move on from there, than to stand and say I won't trust any of you because one of you might do that to me. See the difference? If I start off with a trusting relationship, I'm taking a terrible chance, but I'm living dynamically, creatively, and growing out so that I have the opportunity with the 78, 79 of you that would never stomp on me to live that way openly. And I'm willing to do that because that's the positive. That's not only the virtuous, but that is the non-naive approach. I don't break relationships with people just because they might do something wrong with me, or to me, or for me, or at me. My own strength of character and of love has got to be such that I'm willing to take that chance. And the relationship grows. And it's now and it becomes continuous, because of any relationship which is a state of being has stopped. And that's why I don't like states of being. I like relationships that grow and develop and become more exciting. I like the probing of existence together that opens up a new world. I like watching people as they face their lives and as they struggle and come to grips with what's going on in their lives. I like to share. We had a good discussion the other day, both the discussion group and some of these things that I get involved in about the role of the church. She's not here. I guess she's down counting the money. But I can quote her out loud. Peg Schoberg, when she had Sarah, and I called on her in the hospital, said, "What are you here for?" I said, "I came to see you. It's a happy event. You had a baby." "The doctor told you something." "Is it about the baby or me?" "No, I haven't talked to any doctors at all. I wanted to share this happy event." Ministers don't call on people in the hospital unless something's wrong. "No," I said, "no. I'm representing, we're excited, the church family. I'm sort of here as a representative at this happy event." "Now, Jim, you're not lying to me. I know you wouldn't lie to me." "Peg, love of my life, I love you dearly. I wouldn't lie to you." Now listen, you see what has happened is that we have taken so many of the events of life and moved them outside of the church and moved them outside of the family. Did any of you watch the baby born at home business on Wednesday night? It's a little strange in some ways. I have problems with some of that. But it was nice. Here's this. I've never seen such a congenial group watching a baby born. They had friends and everybody else in. They all participated. It's a little strange for me, but there was something nice about it. I didn't like the problem. But the event became a normal part of life, and it was surrounded. And as I was talking about it with some of our people, I said, there's a sense in which the church and the pastor ought to be there. Not necessarily at that point of birth. That causes embarrassment for people and all that. But they ought to be there. They ought to know. They ought to share that excitement. So that when they share that excitement there, they share the excitement of the baptism. They share the excitement of going through school. They share the excitement of graduation. They share the excitement of getting married. They share the excitement of children coming along. They share the excitement all the way through so that when the point comes that there is an excitement of a new experience called death, it is not a strange external from our existence, but is part of our total life struggle. And the church is there actively all the way through. And it's not just a hatched, matched, and dispatched kind of a thing, but active participants as loving, trusting people at each step of our life. Now, that's tough. That is really tough. But I think that as we live lives together, as we find the right kind of pastors, as we begin to work the right kinds of churches, as we recognize that a church is far more than a building and the number of size and the amount of money that comes in, but it's personal relationships, it's caring, it's reaching out, it's giving in all of its various forms, we're going to learn that trust is something that we all have, one for the other. It takes a lot of work in society to teach us not to trust, and it never quite succeeds. And the fact that it doesn't quite succeed shows how strong God-given trust is within us. In spite of all of the television, in spite of all the papers, in spite of all the focus upon what is evil in society, we still ultimately have our trusting relationships. And under God, isn't that exciting? And may we, as a church, as we dream the dreams together, recognize that we share not just a Sunday morning, and not just the few significant events along the way, but our existence. And as we share our existence on a daily basis, as we talk, as we reflect, as we pass, as we are in tune with each other, we not only support, but we develop that which is good in our own lives, the ability to love ourselves and other people. If that isn't the heart of the Christian gospel, then I need serious help. For God said, love one another, even as I have loved you.